I just love thinking about delicious popcorn right inside. So that was always fun for me. After that, we would cross the street, and there used to be another small theater. There we'd go and watch Tarzan movies. So then after the Tarzan movies, we would walk out, go to there was a drugstore right there. So we'd go in there, and it was always full of people too because they had great milkshakes, malts, and all that. It was just sort of like a Happy Days hangout. It seemed like they knew all their customers by name because I remember when I was sitting there, they'd come over and they'd talk straight to my mom by her name and my grandmother and everybody. Everybody seemed like they all knew each other very well. So then we'd walk down that way to the next corner, and there used to be a little toy store there. My mom and dad, I don't know, had a situation. Yeah. My mom was married to him, and he was married from here, from San Antonio, but she was here illegally. So she was sent back, and she had to decide to leave me and my other two sisters here or take her with us. So she took us with her until she was able to get her papers fixed up again. And then she came back, and when she came back, she only arrived in San Antonio with a suitcase and 4 daughters. Wow. And had to start all over again because at that time my father, well, she didn't want anything with us, you know. So she looked up some friends that she used to have from this neighborhood, and they kind of helped her, you know. They let us stay in one little room for a while, and then we moved to another little room another while. She just worked her way up, you know. I knew I had a father. I convinced her to let my father come and see us, and slowly he just came back and we got to be a family again.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I was born in this little tiny house at 2211 South Navidad. My parents in those days could not afford to purchase a home, so I remember living in several houses. I remember one house we lived in that had a concrete wall in the back. On the other side, there was a dance hall that played conjunto music. I enjoyed listening to the music, and I guess that was the beginning of my love for dancing. Even though my family struggled financially, my parents made sure we went to school every day. We could not afford to pay for college, and was unrealistic for us. I remember Henrietta wanting to be an educator, but she knew it was financially impossible to go to college. She got a job at Kelly Air Force Base at the age of 18 and retired as a GS-11 after 35 years with the federal government. My parents would be very proud of us and their grandchildren because they all have done so much better than us. Most of them have attended college or universities to follow their dreams. In those days, husbands didn't want their wives to work. But I said, I want to work at Hemisphere. He said, they're not gonna hurt you, you're too old. I said, I'm only 22 years old. He just didn't want me to work. Well, I did get a job as a ticket seller, and I really enjoyed working there those 6 months.
Began in 1946 when my father, Alejandro, already married to my mom, Esperanza, and my 2 older siblings already being born in Monterrey. And my dad having this dream of heading north to pursue his version of the American dream. Once my dad secured a place to live and a job, he sent for my mom. So she gets with my dad in Alameda, and my dad had rented a house. Like in Monte Vista, you had these big maids, servants' quarters in the back of the house. That's kind of where they lived in the back of this big mansion with dirt floors. So when my parents wanted to visit their beloved Monterrey, the distance from California to Monterrey, it was too costly. So from a tip from a friend in Monterrey said, you know what, you ought to go check out San Antonio. It's straight up 35 and it's the shining city on the hill. So, you know, why don't you give that a try? So from that tip, my dad visited San Antonio, and that's where the rest of the clan was born. So upon arriving here in 1946, my father took a job at Josky's department store. And he took to sales like a duck to water. I mean, he was a natural. A. Macias Furniture Company was born in 1955, right there on the corner of West Commerce and Colorado. From there, my dad owned several other businesses, restaurants, record shops. He owned Spitfire Automotive. He owned Pancho's Grill on 23rd and Commerce. And then last but not least, Las Brisas Mexican Restaurant.
We're all Edgewood High School students here. And so we had to walk out in 1968.
I did realize that our school was underfunded. We were using books that were about 10 years old, history books, math books, they were written, scribbled on, and had graffiti in them. Our gym, I had PE, and there was no hot water. The boilers weren't working. We were taking showers with cold water. Well, we came to that agreement, there is a problem here. Our windows are broken down in the gym. We agreed that we were going to walk out. And I did not know student council was conducting and having grievance meetings with the higher ups just across the street. I didn't know. Found that out all later, many years later. So when we did march, we were supposed to march on the May 16th in the morning. First break was around 9:20. Some of the teachers tried to block us, not to allow us to move out. And we had some of the teachers, we had to move them a little bit, and we walked. I came out, in fact, I came out the doors right here behind me. And as we hit the doors, people were handing us signs with stakes. And the whole thing, and they already had writing. I couldn't even use my own thoughts. They were already made for us. So as we were coming out, we congregated in the middle of the front lawn. So they gave us some instructions how to be civil. And we started marching. We're over 400 students. So Mr. Mangum called the police on us with the orders to arrest. Well, they sent a half a dozen cops. The police, instead of arresting us, they guided us. They formed a line, and they actually stopped the traffic on US Highway 90, which is right there, which is old 90 now. And the following year, we had a couple of upgrades, some new books, some new desks. This was a cafeteria which ran lengthwise. We had paintings and stuff, and they had upgraded a couple odds and ends. But the cold water in the gym still existed. They never fixed the boilers.
Working with the parents to make sure they were able to articulate that support for the students. We provided strong support for a movement for educational reform that had been in process since the early 1930s. The Edgewood walkout itself is very important because it was behind a lawsuit that was filed against the state of Texas that went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decided in favor of the parents. However, since then, the state of Texas, the state agencies, education agencies, have all contributed and, in my language, conspired to keep Mexican-American children from getting the quality education that they deserve.
One day they just said, grab your books, we're going to start walking. And they started walking from Couples to the brand new Edgewood High School. I did not walk out in Edgewood in '68. The reason I did not walk out is because I believed that the legislators and the decision makers would take care of our children. That was my belief, and I still believe it. I became a teacher, and I came and I taught in Edgewood in 1974, and I taught here in Edgewood for 30 years. During those 30 years, when I started teaching at Emma Fry, I realized that I was buying chalk, I was buying markers, crayons, paper, los abanicos, I was even buying fads to keep the students, I was buying snacks, I was taking them on field trips for attendance. So it got to the point that I said, yeah, there is no equity in funding. So I became a spokesperson for Edgewood. I became president of the teacher group here in Edgewood, and I got to speak in DC, and I got to speak in Austin, and I got to speak in many other states to provide publicly funding, equity and funding. And my fight, even though it didn't start right here in Edgewood, but what I learned in Edgewood took me through my entire career. He was my high school boyfriend, and we're still together, and I was upstairs, right upstairs, because it was my typing class, and the walkout started, and I was through the window, and I'd say, Richard, get in here! So he did walk out.
We did a presentation of what has to be done for the ongoing kids, for our future of our generation.
My scholarship, it was a small scholarship, but it was going to be pulled away because that was another threat that they made to us, that if we didn't go in, we would not graduate. I graduated, I got my scholarship, proud to be part of that walkout. And so many years later, now they teach those law students to study the laws that were passed because of the walkout.
Requested that we be respected, that our parents be respected, that our community be respected. And that was part of, we were not allowed to speak Spanish. We were not allowed, we could go down the litany of things that we were not allowed to do. But it was the track, as Mr. Herrera mentioned a while ago, was to put us into the vocational, track. And so happens that the superintendent at the time, Mr. Steinhauser, was triple dipping. He was getting a salary as a superintendent. He was owner of the construction companies that built the schools. And he was also owner of the referral agency for the students that went through VOE. So that got changed, and all of that came out because of the walkout.
So how quickly did the school superintendent get ousted? Did it happen?
The following year, he was gone, and so as a matter of fact, he tried to get a job after the walkout in Lockhart, and we made sure that he did it.
Larger vision is that we would have a boulevard style that went from the UTSA campus downtown to Our Lady of the Lake University, and Commerce would be a great way to do that. So that means expanded sidewalks, it means street trees, it would mean bike lanes, and also some money to help revitalize the facades in front of some of those businesses. And we also need some drainage and some infrastructure improvements in the area so that as people are commuting down what we know is like an academic corridor, that they have a beautiful experience. We have recently expanded our West Side Creeks, so if y'all haven't had the opportunity to enjoy the creeks, they connect all the way from Alderete Park on the west to Rosedale to Elmendorf, all the way north to Museum Reach. It's really fabulous. I mean, you can cycle on connected trails over 12 miles, but it starts right here on the west side. And I'm just hugely excited about that. They're not all built yet, but they're all designed and in progress. But you can now connect all the way from Our Lady of the Lake University to Espada.